All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to our webinar titled The New Era of Leave Policies. Do we need the period leave? Today, we've got a power-packed panel for you, experts, legal and HR experts with many years of experience, and I'm going to come to them in a bit. But before that, I want to take a couple of minutes to set the agenda for today's webinar. The primary objective is to raise awareness with respect to menstrual health. So that is the overarching objective. And along with that, during the course of our webinar today, we will be discussing a couple of other points which really deal with the benefits of a menstrual health policy for both organizations and employees, and thereafter dive into some of the common objections that we see at workplaces with respect to, let's say, menstrual health leave, and that's a factor that we would like to cover in some detail today as well. What are the objections, and possibly what are the ways in which we can address it? And of course, lastly, provide practical guidance on sort of framing and implementing such policies. So these are what we intend to cover today, and our experts will actually provide different perspectives. Yeah, it's not a panel where you're likely to see everybody having the same set of views. They're shaped by their experiences, which they will bring to the table today, and the organizations that they have worked for in the past and that they're currently working at. So all of these factors will really help us get a well-rounded perspective of this particular topic that we're covering today. All right. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our panelists. I'm Antony Alex. I'm the founder and CEO at Rainmaker. We are a company that creates learning modules on a whole host of topics. But I'm not going to go into that into detail today. There's a lot of that on our website. I'd like you to meet our panelists. First up, Mirul Bhavsar. She's the head of legal, Manipal Academy of Higher Education. Mirul, good morning and welcome to our discussion today. Our second panelist is Kapil Vardhan, who is the CHRO of Mensa Brands. Kapil, good morning. Thank you so much for joining this discussion today. And our third panelist is Supriya Rehill, Head of Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Accessibility at Mahindra Logistics. Supriya, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us today. All right. So before we dive into sort of the discussion, what we had in mind was a quick sort of, because our objective is to create awareness around menstrual health. I'm going to just take a couple of minutes to tell you a little bit about what's, why is this issue being talked about? What are we seeing, global practices? What are we seeing globally, as well as what's happening in India? And then we can sort of dive into our discussion. So just to give you a little bit of context, right? Menstrual health and hygiene, it really encompasses both menstrual health management, which as well as the broader systemic factors that link menstruation with health, well-being, gender equality, education, equity, empowerment, and rights. So these systemic factors have been sort of summarized by the UNESCO as accurate and timely knowledge, available, safe, and affordable materials, informed and comfortable professionals, referral and access to health services, sanitation, washing facilities, positive social norms, safe and hygienic disposal, and advocacy and policy. Now, interestingly, I don't know if many of if this data point is known to folks, but on any given day, more than 300 million women worldwide are menstruating, right? So that is just some data to get started. Now, some of the research that we have conducted, this particular one is from the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, which states that more than 2/3 of women experience a negative impact at work on account of menstruation or menstruation symptoms. more than half had been unable to go into work at some point of time in their careers due to the sort of symptoms that come with menstruation. And for a very small minority, not even maybe very small, but it's a small minority, 4%, this was the case every month. Every month they are unable to get into work on account of menstrual symptoms, right? So this is just to set some context. Now, interestingly, uh, in a survey conducted by the Hindu, less than 0.9% of surveyed women with period leave in their workplace had actually taken leave. So what it really says is that it is the same survey. Really, the first post also reports that around a survey of around 6,000 companies found that just 0.9% of eligible workers had taken menstrual leave. So while the leave is there, the fact of the matter is that very few of those who are eligible are actually taking it. And maybe we can sort of dive into that a little bit during the course of our webinar as to why that is actually happening. Now, here's a quick look at what is happening globally, right? In South Korea, they have the labor law provides for what is called physiologic leave. It's actually called physiologic leave, under which all female workers can get a day's leave every month. In Indonesia, they had introduced a policy or a law actually in 48 and which was sort of restructured in 2003. It says that female workers experiencing menstrual pain are not obliged to work on the first 2 days of their cycle. Japan, which introduced its period leave in 1947, primarily to address labor rights concerns with respect to menstruating women. In Taiwan, gender equality in employment law grants female workers the right to request a day off every month for period leave at half their regular wage. So it's not quite a leave, but you can take a day off for half of the regular wage. And lastly, in Vietnam, labor law stipulates a 30-minute break for women every day of their period cycle. In a 2020 reform, menstrual leave of 3 days a month was added. Female workers who choose to not take such leave need to be paid extra. So there is an entitlement of a certain days a month, and those women who choose not to take it but actually show up at work are also have to be paid extra wages. So that's to give you a perspective. These are basically Asia, Southeast Asian countries which seem to have fairly progressive laws on the issue. In Europe, Spain became the first European country to entitle workers to paid menstrual leave, introduced 3 days of menstrual leave a month, with the option of extending it to 5 if they experience painful periods. Now, coming to India. In India, uh, and this is very interesting to note that Bihar introduced a menstrual leave of 2 consecutive days, positioned as special leave per month in the 90s. So it's not even like a new or a recent development. Way back in the 90s, Bihar had introduced this leave. Kerala provides menstrual leave to its students during their annual examinations and permitted them to attempt the same at a later stage. So, not quite menstrual leave at the workplace, but for those students who are unable to take an exam on account of menstruation, they are able to then attempt the exam at a later stage. So this is all we have in the Indian context. There is no other leave, a policy or a leave entitlement under India's labor laws as such. So that is something that maybe we can think about. Um, Now, in 2020, Zomato had brought in menstrual leave. And I remember when they brought it, there was a lot of chatter around, is it there was a whole section that felt this is the right thing to do. And there was, of course, the naysayers as well. And while introducing it, Dipinder Goyal, the founder and CEO of Zomato, had said, at Zomato, we want to foster a culture of trust, truth, and acceptance. There shouldn't be any shame or stigma attached to applying for a period leave. You should feel free to tell people on internal groups or emails that you're on your period leave for the day, right? So, in a sense, by bringing it out, the idea is to maybe remove or destigmatize menstrual leave or period leave, and to be able to make it a part of regular conversation or accepted vocabulary. There should have to be any stigma associated with it. But as I just mentioned, the announcement was still met with some, while there were a lot of accolades, there was also a lot of backlash. And this is something that I would like for us to discuss in greater detail with our panelists today. Critics argued that the policy could make women look weak, reinforce negative gender stereotypes, and discourage managers from hiring female workers. Well, some of those who were opposing the move were women, but as with all issues, there are bound to be men and women who take, both sides of a story. So that is to be that is to be sort of par for the course in that sense. All right. So that with that context setting, I think we can get started with with our webinar. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen. And all right. So Mirul, Kapil, Supriya, that was just some context setting. What are your initial thoughts? And first off the bat, what are you all thinking? Maybe we can go around the room a little bit. Mirul, we can start with you. We've sort of shared some context. We'd like to understand what you think of it, what you make of it, and of course, what are your views, generally speaking, on the subject of menstrual.
Sure. Thank you very much, Antony, and hello, co-panelists. One thing which have you can say really surprised me. If you see the countries who have actually gone ahead and formalized the leave policy are not one which are developed countries. These are the countries where the workforce ratio between male and female is not very prominent. I could be wrong statistically, but the workforce in this country, the women, I have not noted they are at a very high position. They are generally into a mid-level or a lower than mid-level. So it is interesting to note that what would have led them to have period leaves for women. That's one particular thing. It's little data point, but something which we must ponder upon, because we have seen developed countries or the progressive countries going ahead with the flexible work culture, more diversity and inclusive, and equal representation, and so on and so forth. But while this particular subject is concerned, we have seen the countries like Taiwan and Indonesia taking the lead. So, what could have been their factor which they have taken into consideration? That is something I think we must dwell into. That's my initial thought. I request
Sounds
the fellow panel
sounds
to.
good, Mirul. That's an interesting perspective in the sense that what is it that got countries like Taiwan and Indonesia, um, Vietnam, South Korea? These are all actually, in a sense, maybe at the time they came out with the policy, they may or may not have been developed. But Japan, I mean,
Japan
today,
is an
Japan,
example.
Taiwan, Vietnam, they're all right up there in terms of how developed they are. But I, I do believe some of it, and I don't know. I'd love to sort of hear Kapil and Supriya's views as well. Some of it may have to do with the fact that they are growing also as manufacturing giants. So you have a Taiwan, you have a Vietnam.
Yeah,
There's a huge workforce there that's on the floor. Manufacturing is their mainstay, whether it's chips or other areas. So I don't know. Honestly, that's an area that I'm wondering whether that could be the factor. But Kapil, if I could draw you into the discussion, any thoughts, preliminary thoughts, and of course, would love to hear what you think about the menstrual leave policy issue as just to set the framework for our discussion today.
Sure. Look, no, thanks for the opportunity, Antony. Mirul, very interesting observations. I had not really thought about the diaspora of countries that actually have sort of made headlines with respect to this topic. Nevertheless, I think for me personally, I'll just go back to some, very fundamental thoughts and principles that seem to resonate, at least in my mind, and I'll be very open about it. Uh, I think, so if I really sort of reflect on my understanding, my empathy, whether it happened naturally or whether I was nudged into it, possibly really happened at home. I think in seeing women around me, as in I think. At workplace, a lot of this does get masked. It doesn't necessarily very clearly always come out. The impact on productivity is not very well understood. So for me, I think there are two or three things that really become important, Anthony. I think one is I think just the need and understanding around the fact that I believe flexibility is required and needs to be legitimized. Now, whether we call it leave, call it flexibility, I think are nuances. But I do think that legitimate flexibility is something that's par for course. I think the second thing for me, which is really about also addressing deeper understanding and taboos related to any such subject, menstruation in this particular case, is also to for us to invest in a direction which builds transparency and openness. I think is the second one that comes to my mind. I think the third one, I'll probably wear my people and change management hat in some sense of the word, which is then to say, I think for me it's important to signal a belief which actually adds to the idea of inclusion, and then work through it like I would probably work through any other parameter or cultural parameter where I would want to drive change. Understand what's the bottoms up speak, understand what level of alignment and understanding the leadership team in an organization needs. Signal, and I think calling out period leave or menstruation leave is an important signal, which I think sits out there. And then sort of bolstering that with some level of beefed up conversations, coaching conversations, and a little bit of a light touch approach in inclusion discussions to make sure that the topic comes up every now and then, so that over a period of time, I would like to believe it becomes absolutely normal on the floor. uh, so I think that's the framework in my mind, which I would essentially just put on the table and stop for now. But we'll see how the discussion progresses. Yeah.
No, thank you, Kapil. All very good points. In fact, again, really the objective is to kind of regularize such conversations, make it there should be no stigma. I think it should just be, hey, I'm on period leave today, and that's that. People shouldn't feel uncomfortable even talking about it. So I think that's one of the things that really is our focus, to be able to talk about it, and it should. All right. Anyway, so thank you for sharing your thoughts, Kapil. Supriya, your initial thoughts.
Yes, so this research was very interesting, Anthony. I think when I looked at these Asian countries, and maybe having also traveled to some of these countries, in my experience and completely in my view, I've seen women workforce more than the other gender, be it the organized sector or the unorganized sector. Um, so, um, so it could also be that developing countries, are also, kind of, they've also identified that so there could be two things. One is that there are already enough women. Again, I don't have the data, I don't have the statistics, so I can't really say. But I'm only just, saying from what little bit I have seen. It could also be this approach to attract more women in the workforce, and allow them that flexibility and that enablement and support at work. Um, and it could also be that women are there, and we're already trying to kind of see how we can make them more comfortable. It's interesting to see, of course, the development that's happening in our own country as well, right? And I think now, since the last few years, it's when we've openly started talking about this, but we've mostly shoved this topic under the carpet, and we haven't really spoken about it. Even while growing up, our mothers would also be like very hush hush about it in front of our fathers. At least that's what I have, kind of also seen, right? Even though I
Yes.
come from a liberal family, but it's always been like this topic which is sacred, private, and hence should not be discussed. So the fact that we are even on this panel discussing this, the fact that a lot of our organizations are also taking steps in this direction, I think that says it all. That it's really time to kind of get things out of that closet, and start talking about it. So my personal view is, why not, right? And I believe in the word choice, right? We've got to give that choice to women to choose if it works for them or it doesn't work for them. So it can't be a straight jacket answer to say, no, there should not be a period leave, or yes, there should be a period leave. But it should be, okay, let's just ask women, let's just give them that option to choose if they want to. And also, if they want to, like, I this quote by Dipinder Goyal of Zomato, that feel free to share it that you're on your period leave. Now that's a choice. He's not saying you should say this, he's saying feel free to do that. So it's your autonomy. I mean, you want to share it, you want to say I'm on period leave, fine, you're comfortable, do that. If you're not, that works fine as well. So I think, to me, it's more about choice, that this is available, just like we have sick leaves and privilege leaves and this leave and that leave. So why not period leave, right? That's just my 2 cents, and of course we'll get into the discussion later. But I think, yeah, this is what I feel.
No, thank you so much, Supriya. And I think the point that you made about the right to choice really resonates with me. I think ultimately it's about how it shouldn't be force fitted, or it shouldn't be made mandatory in any way. I mean, that much is clear. So, in fact, just to digress for 30 seconds, at Rainmaker, we have the period leave policy, which stipulates that uh, female employees can sort of take a day in a month, either as a work from home or as a leave. Now, depending on because we realize that it's a spectrum, right? Not everybody has the same experience. That everybody's experience is very different, and some may not even avail of it at all. They would just prefer to work as is. Some would prefer to work from home, and some would whose condition is, it appears that at least 5% of the working population experience, or the general population of women experience severe symptoms, which means they may be unable to work. And so I guess one has to take into account the entire spectrum while framing policies, or and so on and so forth. So I think what I would like to kind of dive into is uh, sort of the first point that I'd like to take up is, how do we address, sort of discuss, the benefits of menstrual leave for both corporates and employees, right? It is often seen as a benefit for the employee, but I think today's discussion, we could frame it around how it might potentially benefit both organizations and the employees, right? It's because I think that's important to ensure that it is not seen as a SOP, right? Or a benefit that only one section of the organization is getting. It's seen as part of a larger holistic well-being. And also, while we discuss this, I think I want us all to be mindful of the fact that we are all in different. Our organizations are all evolving differently and have different requirements, right? Supriya, for example, in your case, you have a large workforce of blue collar workers, right? And therefore, your policy, or how you deal with this might be very different from, say, how Kapil deals with it at Mensa Brands, or a similar organization, or how Mirul might have to frame such a policy. So I think we also need to be mindful of the organizations we represent, and also maybe our own personal experiences that and Kapil, you have some to share as well, so feel free at any point of time to sort of talk a little bit about what inspired you, or how your thoughts have been framed. But to begin with, Supriya, we'll sort of, if you could just briefly touch upon, what are the benefits of a properly framed policy? How would it benefit both employees and organizations, and what are some of the key things that you sort of would like to touch upon in that sense?
Yeah, thanks for that, Anthony. So, so I think in my experience and what we've currently been doing at Mahindra Logistics, we've been talking about it. I joined last year in September, and um, we wanted to kind of talk about, we want to destigmatize, right? So we started to have these conversations with women. But first things first, I think there is immense, organizations can definitely benefit, and definitely employees can also benefit, right? Now, how we frame the policy, what industry we are part of, we also have to make it relevant. So there is no one size fits all approach, like you mentioned, Antony, right? So how do we then tweak that? So if I can share maybe my experience, how we started here, we spoke to a lot of women. So I may have a very different experience, right? And other women may have very different experience. And I think the research that you showed, Antony, where more women said this, that they are putting women in not so good light, or in poor light, or making them look weak, etc. I think I have a slightly different view there. um, so I think in my view, we need to look at it from an equity lens, and not necessarily from an equality lens. Firstly, everybody has different needs, and as we have been progressing as organizations, even the corporate setup has gone through a lot of transformation. Like back in the years, I remember when I started my career, and the stories I heard about the corporate sector, very different, very cutthroat. It still is, to an extent, lack of empathy and stuff like that, right? So even as corporates, we have also evolved over the years, because as a society also we have evolved, right? Coming back to the organizational context, we definitely want to look at it from an equity lens. So we spoke with women, we met, women, we huddled up, we heard. Of course, we had a lot of things to discuss, and one of the things was that, what how would they like to be supported. And so these inputs actually came from women to say, what, now in a place like Bombay, and I'm right now only talking about the white collared workforce, all of us who are privileged sitting in air conditioned offices, yet we are traveling 2 hours every day, commuting to our workplaces, especially in metro cities, if I talk about, right? But we had a first representation from these corporate women across the country, across roles, across bands, to kind of just hear what their perspective was. And the simple ask was, and of course, there were some women who said, no, it's not required, I can easily come. That's fine. But a majority of women felt that if we are given that flexibility to choose to be at home and work, we'll be responsible, we know what needs to be done. But if we are given that flexibility, it would really help us, to kind of manage our symptoms better. And then there were, of course, other set of women who said, no, like, I'm fine with that. So, and then the third set of women was, I think a leave would be better, because I have very, very drastic symptoms, especially on the first day. So now coming, so this was what the white collared workforce, told us. Now, we didn't have too many discussions with the blue collared workforce, but then this was always, in our mind to say, um, because the roles are such, because the industry is such, that we may not be able to provide a work from home or flexibility, or things like that. What is it that we can do to kind of still ensure that they are supported at the workplace? And of course, a lot of this work, Antony, by the way, is work in progress. We have a policy. I may not be able to talk about it too much in detail because we have not launched it yet, but I can
Understood.
probably just share some broad highlights that, we're calling it well-being support. So, and under well-being, menstruation and menopause are two aspects. So we are also talking about, employees who identify themselves as women and who may be undergoing, their menopause journey as well. So we want to keep it as broad as possible, and as we go along, we are also adding, other elements to it. So anyway, on the blue collared workforce, we said what will work. Now, we cannot, because of the churn, that we have in the logistics sector, people working in rosters and shifts, and the talent for war, we don't find enough women as well. So that's another challenge altogether, that we don't have too many women in the logistics sector. So, so framing this policy, how we thought was that, let's also, this needs to be definitely positioned as a benefit, because this then is also somewhere we are saying that we are an empathetic employer. We understand and we want to destigmatize and we want to support you, and hence we've come up with this policy. Secondly, we want to obviously attract more women, and Thirdly, the women whom we already have, we want to take care of you. We want to support you, right? We want to be part of your success. And so whatever you need. So the way we saw it was reasonable adjustment, reasonable adjustment at the workplace, right? In terms of whether it is allowing flexible support or a work from home option, and allowing the infrastructure to be more accessible in terms of making sure that there are menstrual products available at all sites. And this is something that we've anyway institutionalized at our warehouses and sites, as well as all our corporate offices, to say that something as basic as this should be made available, right? And this is not something new. A lot of organizations are already doing it, but we kind of started off with this. and and then we're trying to come up with well-being rooms, where people can just relax. And of course it's gender agnostic. I mean, you could be unwell, you could be going through your menstrual cramps, or you could be having hot flashes during your menopause, but you have this quiet place where you can just be, and you will not be disturbed. So we also making provisions of having accessories like those portable fans, hot water bottles to manage your symptoms. So, in other words, our policy is more around creating a supportive, kind of a space for employees who identify themselves as women, because even employees who are trans men menstruate if they haven't undergone their transition process, right? So our policy is gender neutral, and and so we've made some of these flexible kind of options. So definitely it is a breath of fresh air, because we are talking about it, and we obviously are doing a lot of sensitization. We're doing a lot of workshops around destigmatizing, educating, sensitizing managers. All that is part of course, post the policy gets launched. But this was our view when we were developing this, because this is need of the hour. uh, like I said in the beginning, we have a sick leave, we have a privilege leave. When we utilize it as and when, and if somebody is going through that, why not? And I also feel, Anthony, sometimes we've also got to talk about things and like really have them like in the face, because otherwise a lot of these things don't get talked about often. Like like an argument to this would be, oh, but we have sick leave, so if you're going through your menstrual cramps, you can take a sick leave. Why do you need a period leave, right? But my point is, why not? Right? Why not? So I think this is how we approached this whole situation. But of course there's a lot of work that needs to be done. um, and I also feel that women, older women, need to be more supportive of other women.
Sure.
Everybody's experience is very different, right? Just because I may be a superwoman, I may be very this thing in managing my symptoms. I may be at work, I may pop in medicines and I'll be like, I would not let anybody know that I'm even undergoing menstrual cramps or whatever. But then I can't expect the other person also to be like that, right? So,
Agreed.
so some women, also, some women I know would also say to their team members to say, oh, we've also gone through it. Kuch nahi hota hai. You should be able to manage it. Goli khao and you'll be fine. I think we can't be dismissive about the other person's experience, right? So I
Right.
think empathy is the word. We've got to be empathetic. We've got to be understanding, because see, the workplaces are changing. We have newer generations, that are kind of coming up and working in the workplace, and they need equity. They don't need equality. They think we need
Agreed.
this. So I think equity, to my mind, is something that really needs to be pondered versus equality. And I also feel that um, doing something for one gender, since we're talking about gender, doing something for one gender is not necessarily putting the other gender down,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
If men had these issues, we would be very happy to extend this policy to them as well. Right?
Sure.
Unfortunately, that's not the case. So I think it's just about creating a more supportive a workplace,
Agreed.
so that we can encourage more people to come, and we can make women feel comfortable that they have a choice to take. Of course, if I feel comfortable, if I'm on my period and I feel comfortable that I can travel, and have, or maybe I have an important meeting or whatever, I of course can always choose to not
Get
apply
to
for
work.
that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, that's my view.
Thank you, Supriya. That was, sort of very enlightening. I think you really shared, gave a lot of context around, why, and especially with respect to your organization, Mahindra Logistics, in terms of some of the well-being support. Your policy seems to be framed around well-being support, and which I think is interesting, because your organization is putting in place a infrastructure and a framework that allows women to come into work, but are able to sort of get the necessary support that they need in order to do what they do, and recognizing the challenges that your industry in particular faces, the logistics industry, right? So fair enough. And on the sick leave point also, I think the flip side to that is that a lot of organizations believe that a lot of sort of people who are in favor of a specific menstrual leave believe that it cannot be equated with sick leave, for the simple reason that it's not a sickness, it's not illness, it is a
Correct.
natural biological phenomena that happens. So
Yes.
it shouldn't be clubbed under sick leave. Anyway, so that's the
Yes.
counter or the flip to the argument of taking
Yeah.
sick leave. And I guess uh, organizations, from an organizational perspective, and Kapil would like to draw you into the discussion here in terms of so we've seen some of the benefits that are there for employees in an organization that Supriya has articulated so well. But if you could also touch upon sort of the employee benefits from your perspective, as well as also what is in it for the organization. I think it's key that we also talk for a bit about the fact that it is something that benefits organizations as well, if they are able to sort of put together and frame a policy in that sense. So, your thoughts?
Mhm. Yeah, no, look, interesting question. I'm also sort of, wrapping my head around how do I sort of, bring forward some insights based on my learnings, Anthony. I think a few things come to mind, and I'll go back to active discussions, in my professional life to about 4 years back, when we actually brought this structure and policy in place at Flipkart, which is when I used to essentially work with Flipkart. I think few things, a lot of what Supriya said resonates, because I think the process was very similar in connecting, chatting, taking feedback, trying to understand what works, what doesn't work. The birthplace of that initiative also was, several warehouses where we were essentially going with women only shifts, and like any other fast-paced organization, hurdled into that entire process to only start learning and realizing that, it's easier said than done, and brings forth other complexities which we had not thought about. And that's when the discussion started catching a little bit of fire. I think within our own team, which was really the HR core team at Flipkart, I think there was a significant level of advocacy and support for this. We didn't really have an issue. I think the discussion was more about, hey, positioning, naming, structuring, and I quite like what Mahindra Logistics is doing, Supriya, around sort of, the well-being piece, because I think it's a package. I don't think we had thought of it as deeply at that point in time. So maybe a cue for me as we sort of do stuff. I think interestingly for me, my wife was a very active sounding board as this was coming up. As in I ended up mentioning this to her. Obviously, those were times of COVID. We were fairly often locked up at house in any case, and casual boxes all we could do. I think a few things struck, right, as in and through her life, she's had very, very difficult cycles as well. I think she just completely thumped her fist on it and said that, look, I think this is absolutely great. So for me, I agree, not statistically significant, but I took reprieve in the fact that, look, I think there's advocacy, and look, we might be thinking on the right lines. The second piece that came out through her experience also was that, look, I think just to appear normal, it does mean popping pills and aggressively for about 2-3 days, which frankly she feels very strongly about the fact is not a normal process. If I had the flexibility, I would do less of that. And I think as we sort of started thinking about it, the the benefits started becoming very clear to me, Antony, as in if I were to call them out. I think one is just in terms of, like I said, I think just it became a very important aspect of signaling inclusion, more than anything else. As in, and then there was a lot of debate on, hey, why not casual leave? Why not sick leave? We already have a lot of leave in the structure. So what's the issue? And the discussion that popped up was it's not a sickness, right? As we just discussed. Casual leave, in my opinion, frankly, is probably the most interesting and the weird concept in India, in any case, right? Is probably even more looked down upon. So I think that was the other piece. The second benefit for me was, I think, just in terms of advocacy, right? I think I hold employee advocacy very close to heart. I think I hold the function very accountable for employee advocacy, because I think on the table of business, when business is happening, I'm not saying that I don't need to be an equal partner in business. Uh, but I think I need to be a very vociferous partner in talking about, in being able to sort of talk about employee speak. And I think in that sense, all of these are very, very critical nuances to letting the org know we care. And I think while it may not actually impact the lives of many, many people in the company, the fact that it does for a certain section, I think resonates well with the entire population, is what I believe. I think the third one, which I can actually think of, which if I were to reflect on the journey, is I actually think the process over a period of time makes managers a lot more empathetic. Uh, and none of these are concentric circles which are mutually exclusive, right? As in, if you start becoming a bit more empathetic, if you start understanding the diverse needs that your workforce has, there is a automatic spillover into how you manage, and just sort of take care of your folks and stuff. So I think that's the third one that actually comes to my mind. So yeah, you specifically spoke about benefits to the organization. I think those are three that very clearly come to my mind, Antony. Happy to sort of get more questions or hear other ideas as well.
Thanks, Kapil. In fact, I think a term that you used right at the beginning particularly stayed with me: signaling inclusion. And I think that's very important. Many corporates are now looking at it as a way to position their sort of culture and the way they approach these issues. It's a signal to not just employees within the organization, but to prospective employers, maybe other stakeholders as well. And I think we're increasingly seeing a lot of companies that want to send the right signal out, right? Whether it's in terms of being inclusive, or as Supriya said, equity rather than equality. I think more and more organizations are increasingly focusing on these aspects to say that, equity is the need of the hour, inclusion is the need of the hour. And so, how do we sort of dovetail all of that into our policies? Thank you so much, Kapil. I want to sort of bring Mirul into the discussion. Mirul, you've been silent. You've been listening to Supriya and Kapil and them sharing their views. What are your views? And I'd love to hear about organizationally. Do you view one way or the other, whichever way you sort of your policies are framed? How do you view that from the perspective of the employee as well as from an organizational perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Antony. As we all have given disclaimer at the beginning, I would like to stress that views are my personal. One thing I have 2 points to continue discussion, one from Supriya and another from Kapil. The one important aspect on this topic is the sympathy, not the sympathy, sorry, the empathy that all employees across gender need to show. And I'm quite surprised, very pleasantly surprised when amongst our 27 attendees, close to 10 are male. So, I mean, the discussions like this brings out that empathy angle, that men, though they are not the, you can say, undergoing through this, but they are at least willing to understand women's side of the story because it's going to impact their team, their family members, and so on and so forth. Secondly, it's very pleasant to know that Zomato, in fact, make it very open that you can actually disclose that you are on a period leave. So this is kind of you can say conversation and empathy and the open discussion that corporate needs to know. What the government or the policymaker will do. We are a quite small cohort to comment about it, but the destigmatization, the empathy, and the openness is what is the need of an hour. And a very interesting, you can say, concept Supriya also mentioned, which I discuss a lot, is when we talk about menstruation, we only talk about the first 2 days. There is a considerable population that suffers more than those 2 periods is during the PMS or during the menopause. And I would like to extend a personal story here. With God grace, or you can say whatever healthy lifestyle I have, I do not have much of period problem, but I have a crazy PMS symptoms to that extent that it impacts my emotional, my managerial skill, my ability to think straight. I have always have a mixed team in terms of equal number of male and female and across different ages. I mean, interns and somebody who is a peer of same age and so on and so forth. But because everybody has shown empathy and I've been very vocal about it, at times I have had an unreasonable expectation or a anger outburst under a PMS, and at the end of the day, I have just messaged them, sorry, I was PMSing. So, and they do understand. They don't talk offense about it, and sometimes I mean, over a period of time, some colleagues have also come across and say, you are almost in your tears, just go home. We will take care of the work. I think that kind of inclusion is more required than any policy. Another point that Supriya mentioned and how you started, is we also need to discuss this topic from the angle of the kind of industry we are, both from the separately from the corporate side and separately from the employee side. As Supriya mentioned that in typical workforce which requires manufacturing or more hands-on physical presence, uh, you can say having a very strict mandatory will not work. I come from an education background. So I operate, I mean, my education industry, if you like it or no, you have more of a woman workforce and workforce across all ages. So we have senior teachers who are undergoing menopause. When you are at the menopause phase, it's more of it's equal physical as well as mental. So we have actually had an issue where a senior teacher literally, I mean, she absolutely lost her control and she banged a student, and a student of a 10th grade. And you can understand how much chaos it can lead to. But then obviously the teacher apologized saying that because I'm going through a mental trauma of PMS, I'm unable to handle. And the parents were also kind enough to understand. But you don't come across this kind of understanding people around. So we need, I mean, more than a policy, what we need is a sensitization, destigmatization, and the empathy. If we can bring in that human element to this entire issue, most of the things can be addressed positively, is what I would like to say.
Thank you, Mirul, and all very, very good points. In fact, one of the points, and maybe this is a topic for a discussion on another day, is what you mentioned about hormonal challenges faced while PMSing and how that can impact one's behavior at the workplace, right? And I think that's an interesting one. You could argue both ways, right? In the sense that how it impacts your sort of relationship with your colleagues, seniors, subordinates, right? The whole spectrum, and that is definitely something that I would probably want to pick up for another day. So Priya, you want to make a point there?
Yeah, I just wanted to, Mirul, fantabulously, what you just shared, I think just resonates a lot. And maybe my own personal story, if I can quickly, kind of share it in 30 seconds. So I have been PMSing past 2 days, right? And then finally, it happened to me today. And it does affect you emotionally, right? But I also feel, through those conversations, Mirul, that you're talking about, that understanding is very important, where your team, your manager can kind of empathize with you, right? To say that, oh, she is PMSing, so it's better to kind of maybe stay away because, she will be very moody. She can be extremely moody, and, she can be also very vulnerable. But also the fact, I think, policy, of course, is one side, but we'd also want to, be able to create a workplace, which allows people to be vulnerable. Right,
Hmm.
corporate places have been far away from that. So initially, when I said, that corporate places have also kind of, or are evolving rather, here also we're trying to say, so through our ERGs, we have a women ERG here, and we're really kind of trying to have those dialogues to say, it's okay. It's okay. Why do we have to put that mask on our face to say, oh, I am a superwoman? No, if I am PMSing, I am on my menstrual cycle, no, I'm not feeling well, I will be emotional, I will probably shed a few tears, and that's all right. Right, so
Mm.
I do not obviously want anybody to sympathize with my situation, but I probably just want somebody to bring me hot chocolate, or maybe just, kind of
Yeah,
take care of me at work, right? That's very soothing.
seriously,
So I think
seriously.
these aspects are very important. How do we make our partners understand? How do we talk about this at the workplace? How can a manager be more supportive that, okay, if she's this, okay, let me, just say, okay, you relax, right?
Mm.
I think
Right.
that needs to be there. And I think women also somewhere, we try very hard. We try very hard to, kind of, because again, that's how the unfortunately, that's how the corporate spaces have been made, that you always have to kind of, wear a mask, and there is no space for vulnerability. There is no place for emotions. There is no place for feelings, right? um but I feel that, vulnerability can be really powerful. Your feelings, your emotions can be very powerful. Why do we always look at them as weakness? Right,
Hmm.
it's all right. So I think this is also something. So when we are driving these conversations, the plan that we're trying to kind of also put together is that, how can managers, how can men, the other gender, be real good allies, and how can women also be allies to other women to say, okay, hey, you may be on your cycle, whether you're going through menopause, whether you're going through PMSing, or you have PCOS, it does affect you, and hey, I'm here to support you. So how do we, kind of do that as well? I think that is very important. Policy is to give you a structure. Policy is to give you, okay, we care for you, but I think end of the day, it comes out, it comes at, how we are treating other people, right? How we are making the other person really feel, and how are we kind of, to what extent are we willing to understand? Of course,
So,
there
Supriya,
need to be certain boundaries and all of that, but yeah.
no, all very, very good points. In fact, I was just thinking that as you were saying, policies provide you the framework, but how do you get individuals to start being more empathetic? How do you get them to appreciate or understand what the other person is experiencing, right? And I think that probably that requires a lot more, maybe, I don't know, training, workshops,
A lot of
uh,
dialogue, yeah.
learning awareness, talking about it, maybe having
Yes,
town halls,
yes,
where people can actually openly talk about it. It might make
yes,
some people uncomfortable, but as they hear this more and more and more often, it's going to start becoming a regular conversation. So the first time a person is
absolutely,
uncomfortable, but by the fifth time, it's already it's par for the course. I mean, it's a conversation that happens, and maybe that is the
yes,
way to actually destigmatize conversations around menstrual leave, period leave, PMS, all of those things that at least one half of the world's population, or an organization's population, or our country's population are experiencing at any given point of time. So
yes,
fair enough.
Uh,
All right.
just give
Yeah,
me
Mirul.
one minute, Anthony. So,
Yes, of
like,
course.
on a lighter note, as we have normalized to great extent dating, live-in relationship, uh, you can say getting separated, being single parents. I think bar except for you can say some areas or some you can say small towns or villages. By far, we have normalized these things. We are okay to talk about it. People are free to share their experiences. Um, my personal choice, I mean, the personal preference would be just normalize the menstruation and the things around it and the symptoms around it. The more and more you normalize this thing, I think the workforces will parallelly become mature enough to adjust and accommodate. The first point of inclusion is to just normalize this thing. As Supriya has mentioned, specifically in India, we have a lot of cultural taboos. Uh, that that is how women used to be wired and taught. So let's normalize the sympathy is something which will make things very easy. We don't need a very strict policy, or you can say, not nothing. Lot needs to be done. What needs to be done, normalize it. It's okay. It's a part of life.
Agreed, Mirul. All right, folks, we are actually running a little behind schedule. I just realized because the conversation was very interesting, very stimulating. But we have 2 points to cover, and I'd like to maybe go a little quicker on this one, which is addressing concerns and objections, right? There is always going to be, anytime you try to implement policies that are different or that are new, what is the right way to do it? What is the right way to create the environment where you can actually, make the soil fertile, so to speak, so that you can actually plant the idea and then move ahead with framing policies that are, that would be helpful. So, and I think both Supriya, you and Kapil have mentioned that you've sort of, been involved in framing such policies and the conversations that you've had, etc. Now, what are the kind of common objections you've kind of seen or heard when, whatever policy it is that you've framed in whichever shape or form, for example, can it be misused? I've heard that quite often, right? The potential for misuse, and also what happens when there is somebody takes, let's say, menstrual leave or period leave. It increases the workload of other colleagues, and so on and so forth. So these are the common objections that one might encounter. How have you, and any other objections that you've seen or heard, if you can share, and also, what are your thoughts on how one can deal with those objections? Kapil, if maybe we could start with you this time around.
I think two or three dimensions come to my mind, Antony. I think one is, I think what I'm sort of, learning, and as I, go deeper into this world of startups, as a friend of mine and I were recently chatting and just talking about, hey, do we really get to do some, serious, uh, quote unquote, OD work in places like ours or not? Only to realize at the end of the conversation, we said that, look, what OD really sits in conversations, right? As in, I don't think everything has to be, not to take away business from you, Antony, but I think not everything has to be a big intervention, a large training program, or
Sure.
a exercise in vulnerability and stuff like that, right? So I think there are two or three things. If I really, if I go top down, a lot of the concerns have been around productivity.
Sure.
If I go bottoms up, concern actually was more around, hey, I think you're introducing this, but will I really be enabled or not? As in just, to the point that Mirul, Supriya, everyone's been making, is that, look, I think it's the easiest thing is to probably, in the scheme of things, introduce a policy. The difficult part is, ensuring that, there's this deeper understanding, inclusion, and empathy on the ground.
Right.
I think the third one potentially has been, I think masked in productivity has been a little bit of this question around misuse as well.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that I've been realizing, and I'm not sure if it sort of works across organizations and stuff, is that I think for anything new and which probably looks a little bit more, for the sake of a better word, I think just unconventional. Uh, I think going bottoms up and making it a part of conversations just helps. I may not be able to cover all, 700, 800,000 folks in my organization, but if I visibly go and talk to, even if I'm able to sort of, constructively have focus group discussions with about 80 to 90 of them, I think the word spreads, and I think it builds more ownership as well. And I actually think I get better solutions around how to implement and execute. Uh, than to just sort of do a very very top down policy structure and be scratching my head 3 months later about how do I counter misuse. So I think that's one piece. I think just making people a part of the conversation and actually just helps, because then they feel the ownership. They feel that their voice has been heard, even if what is implemented is a little bit differentiated. I think there is satisfaction that, hey, I think I was heard, and what was done was for a reason that I might not be able to sort of appreciate or whatever.
Sure.
I think that level of ownership is there. I think on the misuse piece, frankly, I think in the gamut of policies I have, I think there is already enough opportunity. I don't think this is super unique, right? I have lots of cases of folks going for earned leave, applying for casual leave on the system, taking leave, not even applying. So I think that used to be like a big movement across the last 2 or 3 organizations I've been a part of. So my sense is, I think the bigger decision is, am I okay to operate with a certain level of trust or not?
Yes.
If the answer is no, and frankly, that's okay. I honestly believe organizations should stand for what they believe. It's a more difficult thing to say that, look, I want to be a trusting environment, and then not trust,
Right.
than to say I don't want to trust and I want draconian policies. I think I'll be happier implementing those. But I think if the call is that, look, I'm okay, and I want to operate with trust, then I think it's fine. I would probably use some level of governance and more bottoms up conversations and ownership to actually drive better adoption and responsible use,
Right.
and to be a policeman on the floor, trying to chase. So yes, I think I covered 2 or 3 things at the same time, but happy to hear other thoughts or
No, no.
and
All terrific points, Kapil. In fact, when what one of the points that you made very interesting in the sense that all policies are subject to misuse, right? It's not just the menstrual leave policy. It can be any leave policy is subject to misuse. And like you said, I've seen in my career, I've seen a lot of misuse of leave policies. So why single out if an organization has menstrual leave policy as the one that is subject to misuse? I think any policy that an organization has has scope for misuse, and which consequently can impact productivity as well, right? So productivity also needs to be seen in the context of whether whatever policy that an organization has, it can be subject to misuse, and that is the way it is. So as you rightly said, I mean, that is my personal view as well, that one has to operate from a position of trust, right? You have to trust your employees, you have to trust the workforce, instead of being instead of policing them, instead of trying to sort of ensure that if the so and so leave policy is there, then it has to be verified, or you have to provide evidence, and so on and so forth. So very critical to operate from a position of trust, or from a position of trust rather. So thank you, Kapil. Very, very relevant, good, solid points. Supriya,
Yeah. So, Anthony, I think productivity, yes, is a challenge for sure, one of the concern areas. But I think more than that, I think we need to also acknowledge that there are a lot of barriers that exist. Huh? So it's not just with regards to, I mean, with regards to women, of course, that, okay, I do not want to hire a woman because after a few years, after some time, she'd probably go on a maternity break. My work will suffer. And these are all real cases that I've dealt with, and I'm still dealing with, right? In even in my earlier organization here, we don't want to hire a woman because they have multiple issues, this, that, whatever. So I think the the response to that is definitely, like Mirul was saying, and Kapil was saying, a lot of conversation is key. We need to have those conversations. We are talking about sexual wellness here as well, in our office. So I think a lot of those taboo topics, we're talking about women fertility, egg freezing, and we're also talking about men's fertility. So I think, again, I go back to my first point of equity. It's not just doing one thing for one gender, but doing things what is relevant to various orientations and genders, and kind of then coming up with solutions. There will always be a set of people who will disagree with your approach with the policy, but I also believe that some things need to be done. Diversity is good. There are enough and more examples that women in the workplace, they bring in they bring in a lot of value, they add a lot of value. And I think some things that are right, they need to be done. Of course, right and wrong is very subjective, but for the sake of
agreed.
saying, I'm saying that it needs to, if it needs to be done, it needs to be done. And there will always be people who will oppose it. There will always be reasons for people to say, no, we don't want to do this, or we don't agree with this, or what are you giving to men, why not? And hence the question, and I may be digressing a little, but hence the topic of paternity leave, for example, right?
Sure.
In several organizations now, see, as a society, we've created a lot of these taboos, right? That, okay, men are the primary caregivers, etc. So we've also kind of come up with a new parent policy, again, gender agnostic, introduced primary caregiver and secondary caregiver. We've done away with maternity and paternity. I mean, so I'm just saying that again, we need to look at it from an equity angle. We need to trust, we need to believe that when we provide that enablement and support to various cohorts, we will, as an organization, we will thrive. And we will have to make certain adjustments along the way, to kind of make sure that, we are more inclusive and that we are accommodating a lot of people, because it's not it's not just two genders that exist now, right?
Yeah.
On the misuse side of things, again, I think it's a short and sweet answer. I mean, yeah, we misuse. Everybody misuses. Nobody takes a sick leave, when they're actually sick, right? So I think we've got to take it with a pinch of salt that whatever policies we make, be it your attendance, be it your whatever, there will be misuse. So I think as an organization, we need to take that with a pinch of salt, that it will be there.
Sure.
Of course, we can build in certain governance mechanisms, to kind of check without really sounding or without really coming across, as policing people. But I think somewhere we need to also give that responsibility and accountability to the employee, and that's how the policies can be framed to say that, right. And of course, if the organization wants to get into any kind of due diligence, we can, right, and there can be repercussions and consequences, right, but we don't want to go that way. So I think I think misuse will be there, but that's all right.
So
Yeah.
what I'm hearing from both of you clearly is that some bit of misuse is built into all policies anyway, whatever it be, and organizations need to operate from a position of trust and go forward with that. Mirul, your thoughts? What are you generally in agreement with Kapil and Supriya? Would you like to add something different? Mirul, you're on mute. Yes.
I would actually like to take a question which is there on the chat session, if I may, Anthony, which is actually the thing which Supriya and Kapil just spoke. Is the first question, which says, how do you handle the potential misuse and abuse? I believe both have given the answer. The another point is, what about the workload impact on the colleagues when someone is on menstrual leave? This is also Supriya had pointed out that whether you are a man or a woman also needs to understand the fact that not it's very subjective. Everyone on its own have a different symptom. So if you have a woman colleague, so you will also realize that if she is taking a menstruation leave this time, there would be a time, or there could be a time in future that you might take. So accepting the individual need during the menstruation is something how you can manage the workload. And when it comes to male colleague, I think as we all mentioned, I would repeat for the sake of repeating that normalizing and sensitizing and empathy is what male colleague needs to do. At the same time, if woman is getting a privilege or a special concession during the menstruation, during the normal healthy days, they need to make up for those privileges given. I think as we say, with all powers comes the responsibility. With all privilege, there are also corresponding duties. Is what I would like to add.
No, absolutely correct in that sense that, look, at the end of the day, if there is work to be done, then as a professional, the expectation is that you will get it done and you will manage your workload in a
Manage it.
fashion. Yeah, while there has to be some empathy from your manager and understanding, at the same time, it's a give and take, and that if there is work on your table that needs to be done, then you ultimately have to figure your way around, manage your stakeholders, and get the work done. Fair enough, Mirul, and I think that makes a lot of sense. All right, we are almost out of time, but I do want to cover a last topic, which is really implementing policies, right? Menstrual leave policies. And I think we've covered it in some degree, during the course of this conversation. But given that we have very little time left, Supriya, Mirul, and Kapil, if you can briefly take about maybe 45 to 60 seconds to talk about how does one really go about framing these policies, and then, specifically in terms of, eligibility and so on and so forth, and how do you communicate this to the larger organization? How do you implement? How do you roll it out? And I know this is possibly something that that can be actually covered in a different webinar altogether, such as the scope. But really, your very broad thoughts. I mean, something that our viewers can take away, that they can learn from your experience. That would be very helpful. Supriya, maybe we could start with you. You
Yeah.
could share your
So
thoughts.
yes. So So I think one, of course, is to understand the demographic, right, the cohort for whom the policy is being framed. It's very, very important to get their voices, versus, four people, sitting in a cabin and deciding on their behalf. So we need to ask women, we need to ask that cohort. That's very important. Secondly, of course, a lot of research goes behind, like when we were drafting our new parent policy, I did not understand surrogacy, to that extent. So very important to speak with real examples, who could share their experiences. You get different, kind of perspectives, and then how then that can be kind of weaved in an organizational context. So I think, yeah, so point number one is, of course, speaking to the cohort, understanding maybe some real examples. And then, of course, your in terms of communication, once the policy, has kind of been defined, so what does the organization stand for? Like now, if at MLL, we want to be, so most of our policies, we've made them gender neutral, right? Because like I said, there are so many gender identities, and we do not want anyone to feel excluded, right? Therefore, even we got to rebranding the DNI department, right? We said no, inclusion comes first. First we need to think inclusion, and then we need to, kind of start acting, right? That was our thought process. So which means that, on the communication side of things, and a lot of these things are underway, preparing some kind of an FAQ to say what could be some potential questions that could come from the audience, right? Because not everybody may be able to understand who a primary caregiver is, or who a secondary caregiver is, so on and so forth, right? And then, of course, the most important part is communication, because just sending out that one document on email, it will get missed. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to do a lot of roadshows. We're first educating the HR people, right? Because they are on the front lines, right? They are the ones whom are being approached by employees. So educating the HR first, giving them all the necessary tools, information, on that particular policy, and then slowly we are moving to different cohorts to kind of, really talk about this policy, take up questions, how to apply for leave, etc., etc. That's the approach that we have taken. And similarly, even for the other policy, the wellness support policy, we're trying to take a very similar approach. And this is going to be an ongoing process, and we'll have to do these road shows multiple times. So it's not like we will do one and then, people will understand. But of course, and we've made spots, for every policy, we, for any questions that people may have, there is a SPOC, which is our team, whom they can reach out to with any concerns, with any suggestions, any feedback. Because I also feel it's not like one document you've made and it's done, right? It will keep evolving, because the first time you make it, it goes through, anyway it goes through a lot of iterations and approvals and whatever. But I think going forward, as and when the requirement or the needs also kind of change, or new perspectives or feedbacks also come in, I think we should be open to kind of also going back to that policy and making those necessary tweaks, if at all. So I think that's how we have, kind of approached. I hope that
Well,
helps.
that's very, very helpful, Supriya. Mirul, your quick take, and then we can ask Kapil to sort of, round up with his thoughts.
My quick take would be, as for most of the things, one size doesn't fit all. You need to be mindful of certain factors, as we have already discussed, the kind of work your industry do, the kind of work profile that the employee profile that you have, the combination of male, female, who is front leading the customer, the dependency, the availability of the resources, the second thing. And the third, that as we are saying that we as an organization or as an employer are also evolving over a period of time, it will require a good amount of maturity of the organization before they even think about this policy. Because I have worked across spectrum of organization, from a promoter driven to a VC back or a trustee or a startup. The mentality and the maturity of the promoter and the top management is key before we even touch the policy discussion.
Absolutely, Mirul. I think that's important. The whether there is senior management and top management buy-in, that is critical to the success of any such policy. Fair enough. Kapil,
Just last sentence, yeah, just last sentence, because as the couple has mentioned that it is the bottom-up approach.
yes.
But bottom-up approach will work when you have a very large workforce. But the sensitivity and the maturity of the promoter has an equal importance. Promoter, or you can say a board.
Agreed, and thank you for that, Mirul. Kapil, very quickly, I would like to take a couple of questions as well, so that's why I'm trying to sort of wrap up.
Nothing more to add. I think in what Supriya and Virul covered, it's pretty much there. I think a bottoms up thing helps to appreciate nuances which will not be understood by the management team. I would agree with both Mirul and Supriya about. I think any amount of time spent on, casually, not so casually, informally, formally, orienting the management team on the why of this, I think is just super critical. Otherwise, I think it can really botch up implementation is what I would say. I think it can really fall flat. So I'll just stay with that. I think I think the only statement I would say is just go slow to go fast. I think the learning across the last two or three times we've tried this, for me, is that timing is very critical, and time
Yes,
spent in letting people soak into the concept and being able to allay talk about concerns, issues, and everything is super critical
yes.
as well. It's easier, if you've done the groundwork, then implementing it is going to be very easy. Otherwise, I think you'll find yourself editing, fixing,
Hmm.
revisiting, etc. I think just very often, which will become very painful.
Agreed, and with you, Kapil. I think that is very important. The whole process of course, as with change, there is likely to be uh, edits and modifications. But yeah, if you take that approach, then you can at least ensure that is minimized and you get a buy-in right at the beginning. Fair enough. Thank you, folks, so much. Before we wrap, we have a lot of questions, but unfortunately, we are out of time. So I'm just going to take maybe one or two questions tops, after which we will have to wrap up our conversation. There are really a lot of questions, but I'm going to try and pick anything that is interesting. Okay, here's one that looks interesting, and any of you can pick this up. Can you share any specific example of how menstrual leave has benefited an employee of yours or your organization on the whole? Any particular incident that you could share, maybe on anyone walking up to you, sharing something, maybe in personal or in response to the period leave policy or something allied to this? Any kind of a personal experience, I think, is really what this individual is asking from any of you, whoever wants to pick this up. Uh, yes,
I
Mirul.
have. I have incidents. I have personal incident. As I mentioned, that I have been very open about the communication, especially about the mental well-being, because I believe that people bring their entire whole self to the work, not only the skill set, but their emotions, their thought process, their belief. So I have I had a team member who walked up to me saying that I know there is an important board meeting coming up. We need to turn out certain documents, but there is seriously I can't my put my strings. I can't think straight. Allow me a day. Let me go home, and before you reach the office tomorrow, you'll get the document. As I mentioned, the open communication and the flexibility give people privilege. I think the responsibility and the seriousness you will get. So that's my personal instance. Is you give privilege and people who are serious, and more often than not, people are less likely to move you.
Thank you, Mirul. Yes. Kapil, Supriya, anything to add to it?
So I think at this point in time, like I said, we yet to launch our policy. So I think a lot of this will probably come later. But given that these inputs have come from the women, I'm guessing and hoping that they would be very happy, for this refreshing change. So I think I'll come with specific examples later. But if I can share a completely different, like a completely opposite of, this, where uh, where one of the employees who was on her cycle, when she informed her manager, the manager was not very empathetic, towards the person, to
Right.
saying maybe you need to go to a gynecologist and kind of get yourself checked, right?
Hmm.
So I think this then, these kind of situations then become a trigger to say that okay, it is important to kind of have those dialogues, but I can't add too much, on real
Sure.
situations. Maybe later for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Supriya. Kapil?
Yeah, I can actually think of two, very, very counter ones. So I think when we were doing this, like I said, I think about 4 years back, one was just the sort of active sounding board that my wife was as my partner was as we were sort of thinking through this. I think that was one. We had similar open conversations within my team because I think all of us just needed a little bit of processing time and stuff. So I do remember that one of my team members actually came back and thanked me for saying that, I think I'm glad that the team is considering this. Like, it's not really me coming from somewhere else, but I think your having this conversation for me is validation for the fact that we might be moving in the right direction. I think the third interesting incident is a different team member in a very different circumstance. Also a woman employee, was strictly against it. And for all the right or wrong reasons, as in it's something which I've learned not to be very judgmental about. And we
Yeah.
said that, look, again, in the spirit of being bottoms up, why don't we have a chat? And I remember that, there was a focus group discussion that happened, which essentially went in with a very strong hypothesis that this is not needed. And, the same result came out of it. And I got to know about it only about a month later because I think some of the other folks came back and asked me, hey, that one was a joke. So that was a very tricky situation for me as well to then say that how do I just sit down and give feedback? Look, I think, and frankly, there's your opinion and there is your role as a facilitator, which I think are
Yes.
two
Yes.
very, very different. And I think what I expect from the team is to sort of be able to bring back an unbiased point of view,
Yeah.
keep your voices aside and stuff. So yeah, I think just it was just a reminder to the fact that this can happen, right? As in this will happen, and folks will have opinion and they will show up in different places. So just need to be very, very aware of that. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Kapil. And I was just going through, scanning through the questions and chats. There are so many very interesting questions, comments that are there. But I just want to be able to just take one more with the permission of the three of you. Maybe one last question that before we wrap up this webinar. Is that okay? All right, great. So one of the question slash comment is regarding equity in this context. If a woman were to take, for instance, a day or two off, what about the time she'd lost to meet a deliverable or a deadline? Okay. Shouldn't these women need to invest extra time to compensate for the time lost? Wouldn't taking such a break significantly contribute to the stress on one's mental health? How do organizations account for and address this? I thought that this question kind of brought out some of the issues that often come up in a debate on a menstrual leave or a period leave policy. So I thought it might be interesting for us to maybe quickly have a response from whichever one of you is free to pick this up.
Yeah, as in if it's okay, I can go for that,
Please,
Anthony.
Kapil.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think again a couple of thoughts. One is, look, I think Supriya articulated this well in the beginning, right? It's a choice. It's not a leave, right? So as in, I think what we've seen is that between implementing the policy and actually leverage or use of the days
Yes.
is usually quite different. As in, I think most responsible team members will essentially end up, just knowing at the back of their mind, look, this is available, and I will probably use it if I really need it. What actually ends up happening on the ground, as in I'm failing to recall statistics and stuff, is that people would normally not take leave, but as in just decide to take the flexibility, work from home, just rest for 4 hours, then get back. As in, I think life on the shop floor might be a little bit different. I think folks will need to disappear, but I think in office roles, I saw that the use of it is more in terms of flexibility than actually completely disappearing. Last but not the least, I think the makeup of it is frankly, I would say in the blue collar zone, I think you just need to manage logistics and work in a way, once there is a little bit of a pattern that is coming through of absence, then you need to figure out, how does it really impact my headcount planning and just buffer for that. I think that's one. In workplaces, I really would not bother, as in it's no different from someone availing any other leave or flexibility,
Correct.
and then saying I need to make up. You know, I I don't want to ignore the fact that yes, this question can come up and can be targeted to this leave, but I think that then sort of goes back to the discussion of how do you orient folks into saying that, look, I think what's the conversation from the top? I think what's the conversation on the ground, which frankly will only evolve over time and possibly.
Agreed. Thank you, Kapil. Yes. Supriya, Mirul, would you like to add anything before we wrap up?
So yeah, I was rereading the question, right, and I don't know how to answer this really, but maybe just a thought here to say that um, of course, if we've if I've been on a leave and I've missed on to something, see again, like I was also talking about that, we've also got to take responsibility. At the end of the day, if we are in an organizational kind of a setup, we know our deadlines and timelines and all of that, and there will be a number of things. I think what also probably triggers other people is that if if women or a particular gender is being given special treatment, so just because somebody has been on a menstrual leave or a certain leave, so it's fine, we'll make that adjustment for you, so the deadline can also be shifted. I think with this it might just kind of, we may just rub off other people in a not so good way. So I think there's no better way of saying this. I think somewhere we'd have to, kind of also try and see that, okay, if I'm getting, that kind of support from my manager or from the organization, how do I kind of balance it out and not maybe, and try that my work doesn't suffer that much.
Sure.
Can I build in a support system? Do I have people who can help me in that project? Can I talk to my manager to say, can this deadline be extended? I'm whatever. I think maybe a lot of, maybe some kind of a dialogue could happen to kind of just
Yes.
gauge if there is a better way of doing that, as opposed to taking extra time, or as opposed to feeling entitled that, okay, just because I've been on a leave and I'm entitled
Yes.
to take a leave because the policy says so, therefore it's okay for me to kind of, fall back on deadlines or timelines. I mean, that's just that's just
That's
how I
something.
view it.
No, that's something that will have to be managed. And as you was speaking, Supriya, I was just thinking, today there are lots of apps that help women track their sort of
Yeah.
cycle. And is it a possibility that you actually look at your workload, look at your cycle, and then figure out, how do I manage my
Yes.
time in a way that maybe I get
Yes.
ahead and sort of complete my deliverables ahead of time, so that
Yes.
when I'm actually on my period, then I can take the day off, and also while I've at the same time or simultaneously been productive and got all my deliverables done. I mean, it's just one maybe somewhat
Yep.
simplistic solution, but it is something that could be considered by organizations or by women
Absolutely.
individually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mirul?
Just 30 seconds. I would like to add what Anthony mentioned. Uh, Many may not agree, but somebody who loves their work is very serious and very, you can say, thankful for the privilege and the accommodation they are getting. I would say if I would have been in that place that because of my privilege of getting a menstrual leave, I'm unable to meet the deadline and the workload is falling on my colleague. I would rather go ahead and make up, you can say, next time for to that colleague to maybe put in that extra effort or help that person to meet the deadline next time. It's like a barter, as I just mentioned for the sake of repeating. If you have privilege, you also have corresponding duty.
Absolutely. No, thank you, Mirul. And that I guess that is in the spirit of working, in the spirit of cooperatively working at a workplace, ensuring that your colleagues have your back and you have theirs, so to speak, so that it's a kind of a cycle that does its job. All right, we have exceeded our time significantly, but
Yeah.
it was such a good conversation that I'm it's breaking my heart to actually end the call now, but I know that we have three very busy professionals who now need to get back to work. So I just want to end this discussion by saying a big thank you, Mirul, Supriya, Kapil. Very, very enriching conversation. I've learned so much from your experiences and what you've shared, and I'm sure as have our participants who have logged in today, as well as those who will be viewing this video on YouTube. A lot to learn and a lot of nuances that were brought out in today's discussion. And I wish we had a little more time to cover some of the other questions, because I was scanning and I realized that there are some really good questions in there, some comments in there, but we are out of time today. So thank you all very much for joining, and I hope I hope to see you on future webinars as well. Would love to again. There's so many conversations that came up today that I think we could do a whole series on leave policies and the like,
Yes.
in the near future. So thank you very much and have a good day.